Awesome. Welcome everyone to the Charter Review Workshop for, I don't even know what day it is, June something.
June
June
15th, Mr.
June
Mayor.
15th. They all blur together. We're not doing a roll call. There's no vote. So kick it over to Jonathan Hayes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Good evening. And also want to say a special welcome to Ms. Nina Ward, Supervisor of Elections for Bay County. Tonight, I think, is an exciting time in our city's history. Since it was first incepted in 1925, our city's charter or constitution has not had any real substantive review or any changes other than changes that have been pushed down by changes to state law since 1963. Last summer, the commission voted to direct the staff and through a charter review advisory board to look at the city's charter and go through that and make recommendations to change that. And so in front of you today, you have before you a memo from the chairman of the Charter Review Advisory Board, which we refer to as the CRAB, Charter Review Advisory Board. And just as a reminder for those that may not know that are watching this, the Charter Review Advisory Board was made up of Brandon Berg, who served as the chairman, Brandon Henderson, who served as the vice chairman, Cecile Schoon, Ron Danzy, and J.P. Ferreira. Those were all the board members. So 3 of the 5 were attorneys, so that proved to be quite helpful throughout this process. I meant that in a positive way, Mr. Zimmerman. So, yes, sir. So they went through and basically have made modifications and suggested changes to our city's charter for each of you to now consider as a commission. And in the process, that's what it starts with. It starts with the Charter Review Advisory Board, and they make their changes and recommendations. And then ultimately, the City Commission has to either decide to accept, reject, or partially reject those, and then put it forward. Ultimately, though, it does have to go before the voters of Panama City to either be approved or rejected at the polls. And so that's one of the reasons why Ms. Ward is joining us here today to answer any questions that y'all might have or that staff might have about the process. We do know, though, that in the event that we would like to see, if you would like to see this rather on the November general election ballot, we would need to have the approved language and appropriate resolutions to her office no later than noon on Monday, August 24th, in order to make, again, the November general election ballot. In front of you, you do have the comprehensive memo that Mr. Berg drafted to kind of just give a summary. Additionally, this was emailed out several days ago. You also have the red line version of all the changes to the city's charter, as well as a clean copy in front of you. And again, that was also emailed. There's also a couple of memorandums that I drafted doing research, looking back at voter history through a number of different elections, getting some data from available both online from Ms. Ward's office as well as the Supervisor of Elections office over in Leon County, as Tallahassee made some of the proposed changes many years ago that you are considering here today. And so those memos were circulated earlier today at the request of one of y'all, and they're available today. And then again, the very last page, just a couple of items for you to look at again. In order to make the November 2026 general election, approved language must be to the Supervisor of Elections office prior to noon on Monday, August 24th. We do have an example. If y'all do move to agree with the charter review recommendations to align our elections with the gubernatorial and presidential election cycles, how the next elections would fall. And then the big question is, how did the Charter Review Advisory Board review and consider these changes? The board did not review articles in numerical order. The work was organized by theme, starting with core governance structure and working outward. And the report that you have before you today, which is his memorandum, spells all of that. I will say that one of our assistant city attorneys and Mr. Zimmerman's colleague, Ms. Smith, Caroline Smith, was very instrumental in this. She's out of town, but wanted to be here and available, so she is joining us via Zoom. And is happy to be a part of any conversation and any questions and answers that you all have today. I will dare say that she probably did the bulk of the administrative and legal work on this process over the last year. And I would, at this time, turn it over to Mr. Zimmerman if you'd like to add any comments.
Thank you. We do. We are fortunate. I am very fortunate to have Caroline helping on this project, and she's will be available to answer any questions you may have. What we did was a lot of research as far as how other, oh no, there we go, a lot of research as far as how other communities have tackled their charter review, and changes have been made, looked at the model charter that has been promulgated through the Florida Association of Cities. We had a seminar actually, or we had as guest speakers at one meeting, the individuals there that put on symposiums for helping with charters. So we have that background. We're available to answer any questions that you may have on it. It touches pretty much everything. One thing we did to quote, clean it up, as state law was enacted in 1960, the short history, Panama City started, I think it was in 1908, and it had a charter. Then in 1926, 7 or 8.
25.
In 1925, Panama City got a new charter, and the state legislature merged St. Andrews and Millville into Panama City. And in those times, only the state legislature approved and adopted charters. Then in 1963, a new charter was adopted, and that's the one that we've been operating. As state law has preempted different things in the charter, municipal code is the group that takes our ordinances and produces the Panama City Code. It also would take our charter and it would redact things and say superseded by ordinance, superseded by state law. So a lot of those notes have been removed in the clean charter. So that is what's before you today. So happy to answer any particular questions.
And if I can just add one more thing, Mr. Zimmerman referenced, we got some outside support during this. We did rely heavily on the Florida League of Cities in looking at other examples in charters, and the particular kind of educational/informational session that we had was led by Dr. Bob Lee. He's a prominent Florida public administration scholar, former city manager of Naples. He's an the executive director at the Center for Florida Local Government Excellence, and he's collaborated extensively with the Florida League of Cities for well over 4 decades. So he kind of came in and helped us and answer a lot of questions throughout this process. So, at this point, there's a number of different ways that you all can move forward, but we just felt that kicking it off with a time of informal discussion and answering any questions that y'all may have was the best first step. So, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, do we want to cherry pick topics, or do you want to go just down the list from the summary that Brandenburg provided, or how would you like to proceed?
Let's go in order.
Nina's here, and we can go over all that part, and we can let her go home.
Well, she can just sit here and have so much fun with us.
We're a lot of fun to hang out with, but, yeah.
Well, that's not a bad idea. Do we want to jump down to about anything that affects voting? It would be the mayor's
So,
terms. And
Do we have to do 60% or 50+1? And Nina, do you think that us being on this ballot, which is also gonna be, the property tax is gonna be on the same vote, does that hurt this? Because there's gonna be a lot of promotion on the top.
So currently for the November ballot, we do have 3 statewide referendums already. So it just kind of depends on how many questions you guys come up with. How length of ballot. Currently, most of the ballot will be just one-sided, and then we'll have 2 state referendums that are expected to roll over on the back. So space could be somewhat limited. If you're asking if I think that, voters that come out specifically for an amendment will affect that, your guess is as good as mine.
I will, one question, and I failed to ask this of Ms. Ward, but can you tell us what is, because some other cities have done this recently, there's obviously not going to be 20 pages of language on the
Correct.
ballot. So how do we do that in advance of and then during early voting and on election day?
How do we do it in one vote to adopt or not adopt? How do we do that?
Are you saying combine the entire charter amendment into one question? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, you have 75 words or less, so that might be tricky to try to get all of this under one question. What the state does is they put out a booklet with the complete language of the referendum. So you don't see the whole bill printed on a ballot. You see 75 words, kind of a summary, and then the state publishes a booklet that we post on our website. We have it at all of the polling places. So if a voter wants to read the entire language, we have that available. So my recommendation would be narrow it down, summarize the questions as much as you can so that we don't take up, multiple sheets of a ballot, and then create some, even if it's just this full language that you have, and we can post it on the city's website, have it at the polling locations, and then also on our website as well.
My thought is try to get it to one question. And if there's something that we feel is super controversial, that's probably something we should hash out before we go into it. I mean, I fully anticipate we'll probably do another charter review at some point. So if there's items that need to wait until another thing, I mean, I think one question is probably best.
Yeah, I don't want to have any new, I mean, that's kind of the point of going through the entire exercise that we did. But I'm with you. I want to have it towards one question. That way we're not, getting into voter fatigue where they've got 3-4 pages that they're having to sort through.
I think our supervisor is communicating that she would
Yes.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it. I think the voters would appreciate
I
that.
think they would too.
Could it be as simple as, shall the revisions to the Panama City Charter as approved by the Charter Review Advisory Board on June 10th and the City Commission on July 21st be adopted, yes or no?
It wouldn't be that simple, because you do have
Of
to.
course, never is.
You have 75 words, and that'll be the key is you got to put people on notice what it is they're voting on. So you've got to figure out how to summarize the whole charter, and usually you just go by section headings and you just list the section headings. And it can be done in 75 words, but you're going to use up close to 75 words.
Can we
That
put
puts
both
it-
of these documents on the website?
Yeah.
Okay.
That puts us in a all or none position, however. If,
Based on what we elect, what we suggest is setting up.
no, what I'm saying, if we take all of these changes and people go through and they determine there's one thing that they just can't
You're right.
vote yes for, and it turns into a big no vote, there's that possibility.
I definitely agree with that statement and that concern. My only thought is it's been 60-something years since this has been looked at. I think everything that I've read thus far, I mean, there's a lot of things that the Charter Committee just communicated back, we're not going to deal with that.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, that's their prerogative. But I think these are more the common sense approach items. And even some of the stuff that's listed here, this looks like a lot, but there's a lot of things that's like, we recommend no change, so I don't know how much there's actually gonna be that's in the context. It may be 1 or 2 pages, is maybe all it is. So we wanna go through each item? Is that what I
We
kinda
can,
understood?
or cherry pick the ones that you want to discuss.
Yeah, I would suggest we cherry pick the ones you want to discuss because there's quite a few items.
With Ms. Ward here, did you want to talk about the election dates, that section?
Well, I mean, nothing that we ever do is any singular one person up here's perfect idea. One of my concerns was, and I'm totally in favor for all these changes, just to be clear. The idea of campaigning in August sounds like a complete nightmare, knocking doors and just in 110-degree weather. It was actually, wasn't that bad in the spring, but I think it's a good change and I'm willing to do it.
If only 2 people qualify,
Yeah.
it would go to November, you wouldn't have to campaign.
Sure.
So only draw one opponent, Mr. Mayor. You'll be okay.
I think the one, so in the elections, I wanted just to clarify single member districts. So we are saying we are charterizing that, which is currently only established through ordinance. Is that-
Charterize it.
Sure.
Now, there's a-
There's
It's a new word.
You heard it here first, folks.
Charterized.
I think it was already that way in the charter. They just cleaned it up so
Is
that
that
it's
not
very.
a
Okay.
It's not in
It
it.
was-
I didn't understand, it said, it's a our foundational element of the city governing, I think that's what threw me off.
What page are you on, sir?
I'm on page 4.
What happened was that the municipal code, the charter did provide for at-large elections. Then in resolving the litigation, an ordinance was adopted and moved to single-member districts. The municipal code just kind of took it out of the charter and said, this is handled per ordinance number blank. And so Caroline actually took the language from the ordinance and just put it in the charter to make it easy to read.
So we're putting it in, so to clarify my question,
we are
it's
charter.
not in the charter currently, we're
It's-
putting it in the charter.
It's referred to
It's referred-
from the charter.
It's
but
referred to, at the end of the day, the clarifying is the commission will not be able to change that.
Exactly,
Okay, so it's being added to the charter. As of,
right.
I think the red line version reflects that, and that's on page 9 of the red line.
so the 50-page document.
Yes, sir.
39.
So, page 9?
Of the red line document.
What else?
All right, so if we go to 4 years, let's see here. Right now, it's every 2. So, and we talked about this a little while ago. That means that this election coming up would be 2 or be 4. Because we're changing it if it was approved.
So currently you have no candidates up this year. So you're talking about putting the charter revisions or the referendum on the November ballot. So instead of your next election being in April, it would then go to 2028.
The presidential election is what it would take
Okay,
place.
so,
So it's extending the current terms of
okay,
office.
all of us.
Those that would be up
Yes.
Those will
in
be up.
twenty
To align
twenty-seven.
with the.
Which is what the beach did, I believe.
Yep.
Yes,
So we're not the first one in.
And it would.
and Callaway as well.
And it would extend the terms of all 5.
It would necessarily have to.
So Josh and I would be on an extra,
We'd be on the next gubernatorial election.
right,
And Alan, Janice, and Brian would be
I
on the
was signed up for darts
presidential.
4 years in a row. No.
If
Okay.
you so choose to run again.
That's my least favorite part of this. But I'm not willing to throw the whole thing out for that.
So one of the things that I thought about is every 2 years, people get to vote for Alan, well, the mayor. They get to on the 4, but they're not voting that year for their ward. Like mine would be on the off year from president to governor. But the mayor doesn't run then either. So 2 wards that are running, plus getting the other people who are gonna go to the presidential election to vote too, are they gonna be as inclined to do that?
I think they show up to vote for the president.
So I
Right.
think the heart of your question is
Does that-
there the same turnout for the gubernatorial as there is for the presidential?
Well, it's gotta be better than what we did with the highest turnout we've ever had, so, is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, to answer your question, the governor's years are a lower turnout. However, the governor's year is still higher than your current municipal turnout.
Yeah, and
So-
I think,
Dated August 28th, October 28th, if you look at that memo, it has those dates.
so there's a couple of things at play of why that voter turnout is higher. Yes, it is because of the national elections, it's because of the statewide elections that brings more people to the polls, because there's more money being invested in advertisement, get out and vote. There's also, the supervisor puts more early voting dates, there's more voter education that's going, there's more polling places. Right now, we get 1 polling place per ward. I think on a standard municipal or standard statewide national election, I think there's like
We have-
3 or 4. And
We have
just
five precincts, I believe, that make up Panama City limits, and then 8 early voting sites.
So that increases the opportunity for
Correct.
voting.
Yes, I think that has a lot to do with why we get a higher turnout as well. And we're not paying for that. That's already absorbed into the supervisor's budget. If we were to try to do that on a municipal election, I don't know how much that would cost us, but it would be a lot
So initially, I was not in favor of moving to November because of the concerns of the agendas being applied to the city commission race. But looking at data from other municipalities that have done this has eased that concern. And I've always championed voting, and so the opportunity to increase voter participation and engagement outweighs my concern about the agenda, of course, until it happens, so.
Right. I'm good with that.
Oh, you said there were currently 3 statewide referendums. Has the deadline passed? There will be no more? or-
No more.
Okay. Okay.
What's the next topic?
City clerk fiscal oversight. And this isn't so much about the charter as it is, we are.
Okay, wait, before, any
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
questions about
Any
voting?
questions?
Because Nina's about to leave early too. We got you out of here in like
Yeah, will you
20
go on
minutes.
record on who you think's gonna win all the elections?
I don't have another question, but I do just want to say thank you, Ms.
Yeah,
Ward,
thank
for
you.
making your office
Thank you very
available not only to us, but to citizenry. You come out when asked or send others, and so we appreciate that
They were the
very
best
much.
part of the
Appreciate
whole
it very
run. I mean, they were awesome.
Oh, they
Their
are.
office is incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, back to you.
Thank you.
No, you're fine. We'll get you back, don't worry.
So this is, city clerk, fiscal oversight. Really, it's just city clerk, and what we're gonna do with the city clerk.
Commissioner, can you tell us what you're looking at, sir?
I'm looking at page 5 of the memo.
Got it, thank
Page
you.
5 of the memo. And so the idea here is that we are potentially gonna move the clerk underneath the city attorney. I'm sorry,
City manager.
not the city attorney. You're welcome, Ned.
Did Caroline do that?
So, yeah, under the city manager, and then create a CFO position that would just give fiscal oversight. And I think that was the kind of the compromise that solved both issues of, we want fiscal oversight that the city manager cannot influence, but at the same time, we also have these other clerk duties that need to be done. And I think the rub there was, can the city manager manage, right? Can the city manager actually manage these things? And so I think what is born out of this is a much smaller office that doesn't have near as many people tied to it. And it moves the majority of the folks that would be in that office now underneath the city manager. Not necessarily opposed to that, but what I'm pointing out is that we are hiring for this position right now. So we can continue to do that. We can continue to hire for that. But if we're gonna tonight vote to move, or not vote, we're not voting tonight, but if we're gonna tonight, have this thing move forward where it comes in front of us to vote, and we don't have a lot of contention in this document tonight, then we need to probably approach the city clerk hiring in a different manner, is my point. And so it's not so much about the charter as it is, if we're moving forward, it's just that if we're moving forward with this charter, we need to think about how we're gonna, who we're hiring for the city clerk, and is that position gonna be a CFO or is it gonna be the clerk?
Commissioner, if I could, the city clerk job description is very, from my recollection, I know you guys helped craft it, but it's very highly technical and really focuses on the financial piece. I think what's being proposed here is that the clerk functions, really the public records request, the person that serves as the records custodian would then report to the city manager. So like just from an org chart, like if you charted that out, it'd really just be accounting and the CFO or comptroller, whatever you call it, remaining with those duties. And then what I would imagine the deputy city clerk and your records clerk would just move over to underneath the city manager.
So you're suggesting that the clerk that we hire for that position be the CFO?
Or, I mean, I'm suggesting what I think the charter suggested to y'all is keep the CFO duties over here and move the public records and the clerk duties under city manager.
Understood. All I'm saying is that currently we're hiring for a singular position. And if this passes and if we put this before November and it passes, then that's now two different jobs.
So I
That's all
brought
I'm
that up to,
Yeah.
same concern.
Yeah.
I brought
I
it
had
up
that
to
same
John as
concern.
well.
Yeah.
So Jonathan, tell me what you said.
Yep, I think I emailed with Commissioner Street, had the same question, but, and I did confirm with Mr. Zimmerman and also with Ms. Lewis, who, has 30-plus years of HR. obviously the heavier part of this job is I think they use in the term comptroller or the CFO component to it. So it's the treasurer part of that job. And so we could, obviously there's a lot that still has to happen for y'all to approve it, although I like the way we started now. It seems like we're moving pretty quick, it seems. But, it has to be approved by you guys. We have to get it on the agenda for November, and then it has to pass. So there's a lot that has to happen between now and November 3rd. So, the feeling is to proceed as y'all have right now and hire, a clerk treasurer. And then, during the interview process, we all and you all can let the person know that, this is a potential change come November. And that's something that can be worked out in the contract down the road if need be, if a portion of that job, because the clerk's responsibilities, even now, I would say, are the smaller part of that job when it comes to the level of responsibility, because that financial oversight and independence away from the city manager and the city attorney is what's critical. So everyone feels we can easily deal with that down the road. And it would just be somewhat of a, with an expectation that when the contract is finalized, just like the contract that I have with y'all, that could be one of the notes that, that the job could change in November of 2026.
Would we, my applicants that I turned in were much heavy financially than clerk. But I think my point would be that if we could go to November and have the job description for that position of treasurer, would we get more and better applicants for a treasurer role?
Yeah.
Versus muddying them together where someone's like, well, I don't want to be a clerk. I'm a financial person. So that was my concern about having these two decisions in tandem at the same time.
Because somebody might not apply
Yeah.
because.
So just so that I'm
So that's a completely
transparent.
different conversation.
Yeah, well, and this
Non-charter
is,
related.
this is how I handled it and I think this is kind of one of those common sense changes to me. We had a saying when we used to do music stuff, like, find me an artist that also likes to do spreadsheets. And I think that's very similar in a clerk role versus someone that's a CFO. They are ultimately two different skill sets, which is why we've always had to have deputies. And we see what happens when we don't have deputies, because you need to have specialists in those areas. In specifically moving it under the city manager's role, I think the clerk, you might find somebody of deputy quality is able to facilitate that job. Doreen has done a fantastic job what she's doing. I don't think we would go and hire anybody else if Doreen was that person. And
Here.
I think that's the same thing that kind of exists. So for me, I do think this is a kind of a common sense element. I do think our heaviest need is on CFO responsibilities. And so, I mean, anybody that was just a straight clerk, I eliminated them from my consideration. So that all the applicants that I put forward, I even said this to Vicky when I sent them to her. I said, Vicky, I really struggled with a lot of these applicants because there's a lot of clerks in them. And by the time I got through everything, there were a lot of people that had experience as a clerk. A lot of people had experience of some finances, a few that had in between. But I did ask the same question is that, now you could look at that one or two ways. We can proceed forward with interviews and start the process, see how we get as we're going through it. It's definitely not going to happen overnight. Or we could look to Brandy and say, Brandy, would you facilitate a couple more months as we continue to find applicants and let the people facilitate this? I haven't had that conversation with Brandy. I don't know whether she'd be willing to, but that is an option as
Is that
well.
Her heart
Conversation
just
you
stopped
should have.
wherever she is right now.
Yeah.
So Josh, is that a conversation you should have?
I don't know. I think this is the conversation that we should have.
Okay.
So, yeah, so.
Okay. In as much as, when I looked at the candidates, I looked at clerk treasurer, equally presented. If we are moving in a direction different from that, I would say that we need to re-advertise for what we're looking for. And we've got, unless the timeline has changed, Janet's in the office until August to provide the insight. And then November is 3 months after that. So
And somebody
Let's-
told me that we have our deputy, I think, secured. Do we have a deputy treasurer now?
Yes, Josh Gosage joined our team
Okay.
a few months ago.
Okay.
Doing a great job. I know that both Ms. Smith and Ms. Waldron are very impressed by him, and he's joining and meshing in with the team very well.
So better to advertise for what we want, and then we all look at the candidates with the same criteria in mind.
I truly did struggle, and I communicated that back to Vicky, and Jonathan was on the email thread too.
So I like these proposed changes to the charter, and I'd like to see the job description or the job posting continue and even possibly be rewritten. But in the anticipation that this change does get passed.
Well, why don't we have two set up? And then if this passes in November, then the CFO job goes out. And if it doesn't, well, then we just, the clerk treasurer
Sure.
job goes out. But yeah, I share the same concerns that, you know, we're hiring for, we put out there, we're hiring for a specific thing, and then we got people to apply to that, and then we're changing the job on them potentially. You know,
So I was surprised at the number of people on the minimum qualifications that just had a driver's license.
yeah, that didn't, that
Like,
weren't
you're
really.
dealing with money
yeah.
here, folks. But if we separate that office that has 11 employees in it, what does that look like? The city manager's office is not really slim on, they're fat on a lot. They don't have a lot of room. We don't need to give them much, they're pretty busy in there. So putting something underneath the city manager, that's just more there. Well, is that a concern? How many people does it take to do the clerk part of that? I don't know. I think that's she's in charge of setting up all the agendas and all that, right?
I mean, like from a task perspective,
Right.
she's not picking items, she's taking what she's given
Exactly.
and organizing.
Creating it,
correct.
yes. What does it look like on the other side? Are we gonna decrease people or are we gonna increase people? Where are they gonna sit? Let's think this through on how does that look?
It looks like it looks now, it's just you move one hierarchical organization underneath the CMO. I mean, that would be
Okay.
a pretty easy thing
Yeah, I
to
don't
do.
think anybody's proposed more staffing.
Okay.
If anything,
Just
I
wanna talk
think,
about everything out.
Yeah, that's good.
I-
Fine.
I think if anything, what it allows you to get more specific in the skill set that you're looking for those particular individuals, like for the deputy clerk, or which would be a clerk, you now have eliminated essentially a layer of complexity from that. I mean, Jonathan hasn't asked for a raise to manage the more employees.
Just be one more.
So I think it's kind of a smaller amount.
And to be fair, you already have the HR piece to that. You already have that. So I mean,
Yeah.
it would just be more of a, in the military, you always want to know who's your boss and who reports to you kind of thing. And so I think in this sense, it would just kind of realign that. if
Okay.
that
I
makes
think
sense.
from our perspective, it probably gives us more access to a specifically financially minded person, and allows us to hire that position with far greater intention than trying to find this duality, somebody that's gonna help with elections, somebody that's gonna help with record keeping, somebody's gonna help with agenda prep, somebody's gonna help with all those things. Rather, you just get somebody that, hey, look, I'm here to be your comptroller and make sure there's accountability in your finances, make sure that you're doing a good job and ensuring your bondholders are satisfied and you know where every dollar goes and what all those, it's just a different role,
Okay.
so.
All right. Any other discussion on that item?
No,
Let's move on. What's the next hot topic?
I've got one.
Oh, yes, sir.
The city attorney shall prepare all is the contracts, bonds, and other instruments.
Can you tell us what you're looking at, Commissioner Hughes?
City
please?
attorney, appointment duties, section 104.
What page? On the red line?
12 on the red line or the
I'm on the red line.
I'm
but
assuming
I
he's
don't
looking at the
know
red
what
line
page
version.
I'm
No.
13 on the non-red line version?
on. I don't know. It's down there. So if we do an RFP with an underground guy, they have their contracts. Is it it's easier, in my opinion, to take that and, add changes or whatever we need to, unless we have a template that we use, because that's hourly work that we're putting towards the bulk on the all part of that, where we can add an addendum if we need to. And I wanted to ask Nevin about this, I forgot to ask you in the meeting. Because it's not that it's a problem that they're writing them, I'm just trying to create where that's one less thing our attorney has to do, but can bring that in and review it and make sure if we need to make changes to it.
It's page 24 and 25 of the red line version.
So your
And do we already do that? I don't know.
your comments are related to like standardization of like legal documents.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you win the bid and you got your contract, well, you know what all the insurance is and all that, and you bring it in, by this, we have to rewrite it and then send it back out to that. Why not take what we have, and if it works, we need to add a few more things in there. Now there's less time spent on that contract.
No surprises. Yeah.
And there's more time for the attorney to work on stuff, because that takes a lot of time. Now, I don't know, and I need to ask you, do we have templates already ready that we use for underground or for survey? I don't know.
Would that be a resolution that we pass of like, let's look first at the template thing?
And it may not be a problem. I just saw, words matter so long.
Just history, that same language that we've had since
Yes, sir.
1963.
Yeah.
And so the practice is that it's not so much that the city attorney prepares, but the city attorney does review and sign off on all contracts. So whether or not the city attorney prepares it, is not, that, we've always interpreted that to mean that the city attorney reviews it, takes ownership of it, and signs off. As far as standardizing of legal documents, I think that is something that happens outside of the charter. We have a lot of things that are standardized. We can always do more as far as that goes, but we have, I know with code enforcement, it's become, through Natalie's efforts, very standardized as far as how we handle that. Different contracts have a lot of the same provisions in it. I mean, and so that is standardized, different provisions. But what that means is that the city attorney signs off and takes ownership and has reviewed primarily all of the contracts that the city enters into.
And it says shall, not will, so shall doesn't mean you have to, right? Or will does. Because some guy some engineer comes in here, pays attention to every word, and says, oh, no, we're not gonna do that. If we're changing things, I'm just trying to think into the future. And it's not a problem for me.
I
I'm just,
think shall and will are
Similar.
similar, but it's when you put can or should.
yeah,
May's a good choice too.
Prepare,
May.
the key is the word prepare, and whether, I mean, I've interpreted prepare to mean,
and it has in there, Nevin,
I
that you
know.
have to okay everything. So
Yeah.
that's still there.
yeah.
So one of the things that and Nevin and I had this conversation, I was like, why do we spend so much on attorney's fee? Why are you reviewing every single thing? Something's caught up in legal. We had this conversation like multiple times, especially at the very beginning. I'm like, this is just a bureaucratic mess, it seems like. But as time has gone on, what I have seen is the wisdom on the other side of it, which is there have been instances where our team members have executed contracts that did not go through the city attorney's office, therefore they're not legally valid.
There you go.
And there have been times that the attorney's office have caught things that would not have gotten caught otherwise. So it's a two-edged sword. It does create additional legal expenses for the city in doing it the way that we're doing it. However, it also creates added protection. And if you look at it from just the perspective of how many items I can say have been denied as true and legitimate contracts because they were not executed through this review process, it probably adds up way more.
Does that have to be in the charter? Or
savings.
can it be in like procurement?
I don't know.
Policies or something?
Great
Yeah,
question.
that's true. And I'm not against any of this. I'm just trying to figure out, is that, if everybody has a contract.
Yeah.
And can we attach to it and make some changes? Yes. Does that speed the process up? Don't know.
I think the standardization absolutely should be a policy thing. I think
Right.
that is something that we could.
As
we
much
need to
as we
have an-
can.
Yeah,
As
as
much
much
as we
as you
can.
can. I agree with
What-
that.
to
But the real teeth of the charter is explaining who has the authority
Tenfold.
to create an executable contract. And what it's saying is the city manager can go and contract for things, but it is not a legally binding document until it has gone through the city's attorney's office and they have that, and they have to be the ones that have to defend us against it.
And the comptroller too, I think, has to approve on it, doesn't she?
No,
Where
it's-
where we're spending money.
No, sir, it's the city attorney and the purchasing division have to review all contracts, and the city manager's office,
Okay.
Yes.
there is,
in accordance with our purchasing policy and procedures manual.
to answer specifically your question, now that I have it clear, he or she shall prepare, you could add or review all contracts. I mean, I think that answers your
Right,
question.
and I'm not trying to take you out of the deal, I'm just trying to make it so,
I understand.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, so that could be an
Actually,
easy.
I think the word prepare is the more precise word to use.
Yeah.
When you put a or in, that begins to muddy things. And if it doesn't go through his office, he has to prepare it. So prepare it for our review, prepare it for commission decision.
Yeah, I'll look up the definition of prepare, but I've always interpreted it to mean I don't actually have to write it, but I accept the work that's provided by people that work for me, individuals that I do business with. They give me something, I look at it and so.
A lot of our bids and the contracts are kind of templates that, we kind of plug and play.
Just wanted to show off that I had read this document.
You did.
You did.
You read, you read the wrong section.
Right. Right.
I'd like to, if you're satisfied with your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner, I'd like to move us to agenda setting. And a question that was just raised in the last issue.
Ma'am, can you just tell us what page on the red line you're on?
Oh, I have no idea what page is on the red line. It's
Page
the agenda
3 on the
setting.
summary.
Yeah, it's on page 3 at the bottom and continues to page 4 on the summary. And so my question that I plan to have here that came up in this just past discussion is this something that needs to be in the charter? Agenda setting can be handled by procedures, by policy. What makes it a charterable, as we're charterizing everything, Commissioner Street? What makes it worthy to be in the charter?
I also had a question on this section too, so maybe that can be answered at one time, is what about in emergency situations? Like 48 hours notice is, I don't see any provision that allows for the flexibility that may be needed with a disaster, or I guess that was the other
Would that be
thing.
handled under the rules for emergency meetings?
I don't know, that's my question. I got an agenda setting that says 48 hours notice, which ultimately I
Yeah.
don't disagree with. I mean, that's fine to me, but just as long as, I mean, I can see a hurricane happen, the next day we can't meet because we got to publish an agenda. You got to get a computer, what happens?
Yeah, my concern is whether we need to address it in the charter, number one. Number two, the hypothetical presented at the end of the paragraph on page 4, last minute or unpopular items can be raised and decided on at a commission meeting without real public notice. My question is, has this even happened? And then the decision, 48 hours, the provision here that any commissioner can notify the city manager or mayor to add any item to the agenda anytime prior to 48-hour posting. If at 47 hours and 30 minutes, the mayor decides we're going to add this to the agenda and we're not aware of it, this doesn't block that scenario from happening.
Yeah, I think this raises a lot more questions than it answers, is kind of the thought process I have. What are we solving for here? So like, I don't have a problem with the mayor approving the agenda as long as that is a more ceremonial thing rather than any one of us trying to put something on there and then all of a sudden we can't because.
Yeah, I want to prevent, Jonathan's awesome. I want to prevent the city manager preventing this board, future boards from putting things on the agenda. So I want us all to be able to put things on the agenda, future commissioners, future mayors, so.
When he said-
Understood.
What do you mean?
Well, what I don't want is the future city manager not allowing elected officials to put things on the agenda. That's what I'm trying to.
Has that happened?
It could,
But has it?
no.
Okay.
But neither has an earthquake, are we still?
Yeah. The realities of a category
I know that-
5 hitting us were reality.
I could
Possible,
I
but-
could think of an instance that maybe it has happened. You guys can clarify with that. But I think that we had an issue that kept coming up over and over and over again. And eventually we kind of had the conversation of like, Robert's Rules of Order, you can't keep bringing up the thing you keep voting against. Like, does that make sense? So I don't know, does this prevent that? I don't know that it prevents that.
No, I don't know that you can,
No.
that's a tough one.
Mr.
respect.
Zimmerman, does rules that we set whenever there's a new group elected, we review the policies and procedures, rules of order. Does agenda setting fall there? Where it doesn't have to be a charter review meeting to address any of these things that might come up?
This does not have to be in the charter. This can be, right today, it is handled as far as how you set the agenda and how you conduct your meetings are in the rules of procedure. And you can change that, you can get more specific. But the Charter Review Committee felt they wanted to put it in the charter because they felt it was well, as Mr. Berg said, they called it, he termed it a citizen protection measure, trying to make sure that citizens had notice, more of the notice of what was going to be in the charter, because there were two issues in this.
And I did discuss
One
that.
issue is notice, the other issue is setting notice.
But I did discuss that with him, and he said they meant hardline 48 hours. So 48 hours is Sunday.
Well, I think they meant, they don't mind discussion, what they don't want is.
Voting items.
A voting item where we go, we call, you're out of town, we call some special meeting to vote on something that's super controversial because we know someone's out of town and everybody's surprised by it. We're trying to keep surprise, I think, so I don't mind adding agenda items as long as they're non-voting agenda items, like discussion items. But we're trying to keep the public from being surprised something just happened and they were unaware of.
Yeah, I'd like to see us move this out of the,
Yeah, which I'm fine with that too.
Well, I have a suggested change. Just change the word agenda where it says the mayor shall set the agenda. Just change that to framework. Because I think that's what you're aiming for, right? Or they were aiming for, not you, but like the goal of this is to aim for that the mayor has some kind of way of controlling the meeting.
That can happen very easily.
But the problem is that if you get a very, very contentious mayor, which would never happen, that if you give this power, this specific power, it could be read in all kinds of different ways and in ways that could be used as a bludgeon against other commissioners. And while up here, a lot of times we don't agree about everything, and imagine that.
You think that?
We don't agree about everything, and that's okay. That's part of how this is
Yeah,
supposed
it's
to
actually
work,
good.
right?
yeah.
But I would never want to see us fashion a bludgeon out of this for a bad actor. in the
What
future.
about a statement of no adding agenda items that are to be voted on unless we're in a state of emergency? Like there's some, and
Agreed.
that's codified in the policy where it's like, yeah, we want to avoid a city manager in the future walling off future boards of adding things. But we also don't want sneakiness of future boards where it's like they added something the day of and they're voting to do some terrible thing that no one's aware of and we can't show up for.
And I get that. To me, my biggest problem is today we're all equal. And that gives the mayor a step up immediately and you're not all equal.
Yeah.
So I think your agendas for the last 2 years would have one item on them.
Yeah, I think the entire board should go to add whatever they want. I want to prevent the city manager.
And I like your
But doesn't
point
that say that right now? Doesn't this say that the commission can add anything?
Yes.
well, they
Yeah,
can
kind of
add
confusing way.
with 2 votes to get there
No,
No,
no, that was the original.
that was the original.
That
They
was the
changed
original.
that. They changed, this language is more focused around just 48 hours notice is really what it comes down to, which I think the intent of it is very good from a transparency perspective. I think the practicality of trying to determine every single instance in which this may affect, I
Yeah.
think is very challenging.
And
And-
for that reason, I think it should be in a document that we can change more easily than the charter.
Yeah, I kind of,
So
I
right
agree
now,
with
we have to have
Janice.
everything in by today for next meeting. So what this says, if we wanted to add something, it has to be within 48 hours of that meeting.
If you want to vote, I would prefer if. you
40
want to
hours
vote.
of posting, so that would actually be, we post 4 days by policy, so
Right.
that would be 6 days in advance.
Mayor and Commissioners, is there any appetite to entertain addendums from staff? I mean, we know we have them occasionally because we run into either it's grant projects or construction projects, we may need a resolution in support of a grant on a deadline, anything
think-
like that.
Call a special meeting for it. I'm trying to prevent, me in my elder years of going, what just happened? They did what? And no one being aware of it. And then also future mayors feeling walled off. Those are my 2 points, wherever they land on.
Who
Rest
approves?
assured, it's not gonna be another 50 years before the
No.
charter is reviewed.
Yeah, that's true.
Nothing can work
We're
on
making
next
up a
one.
lot of ground here.
He'll be around. So today, we have to turn it in, we get our draft. Who approved that draft? Was it Doreen or was it you?
The actual draft
Nope.
of the agenda,
The one-
it's honestly, it's a collaborative effort between the city manager, the city clerk, and the city attorney. Like most of the, I was using as an example as city manager, and I want to say one thing that the Charter Review Board really tried is like to take personalities out of it. We all know everybody loves me and everybody loves Alan, right? We all can agree on that. So, but what happens down the road when we're not in this seat? And so they were very careful to that end. But honestly, I rarely, on my own initiative, pick my own agenda item. I mean, most of the time it comes up through the planning board process, through the directors or the chiefs because of something that requires a budget amendment, or it's above the $100,000, even if it's in the budget, if it's over $100,000 or it's a contract or something like that. So to answer your question, it's really a collaborative effort, but again, the clerk treasurer is not really making the decisions except for under their section. Everything else is like what's given to them from the directors, from the chiefs, from Mr. Zimmerman and his team.
Okay.
And then all the clerk does is organize it in accordance with our standard template for agendas.
Okay, so I'm all on board for, you can add something and not vote, that's pretty cool. Or if it's within the time frame doing that. But I think we ought to make a rule where we all stay equal.
This is page 13 of the red line. by
Oh,
the
I
way.
know.
Yeah, all right.
So
Yeah, I was just
I
reading it.
fully support exactly what you're saying. I don't think I don't think as written, there's any change of us not being equal. What I would ask the question is, one, the reason why I went to emergency powers is I'm thinking through
You've been through
accident
that.
happens, does this apply to that? Or is the emergency powers supersede this and should that be spelled out here? Because, you guys know as well as I do, an event happens, sewer line breaks, whatever, we could find an emergency task order onto our thing. Now, a policy perspective, to Alan's point, I don't know why a policy decision would have to be made within a 48-hour period. I think that is completely, we don't just wake up one day and say, hey, we're crafting an ordinance, let's go put this on the agenda. That's not the way that process works. But an expense can be
Bless you.
very much immediate, and that does require a vote. So I would just like there to be clarity on how that's executed. A policy point, I think it's great for transparency, it's great for that. The purchasing is where I get, and emergency contracts, emergency services, that kind of
We did this last regular meeting where you had an item that you wanted to bring up, and it was very, very apropos for the discussion at hand. And we moved that forward. That wasn't technically on the agenda. You would not have been
Yeah,
able to
that's
do
true.
that.
That's true, yeah. That's a good point. So you just talked me into, maybe that's not good. So like a great example. I mean,
And-
truly, that's a good example.
So thinking through the fundamentals of this and like, how does this thing work, right? How does this work? So, like, for instance, at one of the meetings, a commissioner wanted to add an additional item or an additional wording on top of the motion. Wait, where's that line drawn? When the motion itself has completely moved away from the item at hand, which has happened, to solve for maybe the root cause as to why that issue was being brought to us, right? Maybe that's why it happened. Maybe it happened because we just tangented and went down a rabbit hole. But at what point do we say, whoa, hold on, this wasn't 48 hours notice? Like, I don't see that happening in the middle of a meeting, because, I mean, unless our parliamentarian is like, whoa, time out, because we're going to be so engrossed in what we're doing that it's, you know what I mean? Who's
So
going to
if
stop and be
somebody
like,
put it
whoa,
on
time out?
within the 48 hours and it's non-voting, they're gonna tell us that, aren't they?
At the meeting,
Well, it would have to be non-voting if it wasn't within the 48 hours.
you'll find out.
Okay,
This could be an aspect of maybe we work on this from a policy perspective prior to trying to put into a charter. I mean, your question was your question to me was very poignant of, yeah, it would have actually changed something that we just did, and I think it was a good policy decision, so.
Of course you do.
So did you.
Well, yeah, but I just couldn't pass up the obviousness of the moment.
Yeah.
All right, any other
so what do we
discussion?
do with that? We just keep working on it?
Remove it, iterate on it? What should we do?
I'd say remove it, is my desire.
We can't vote here today.
No, we can't,
you
but
can-
we can provide direction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
direction.
you can provide input and then you can see a draft where that's.
I'd be okay seeing a draft. Otherwise, if it's gonna extend the timeline, I'm the exact point that Commissioner Lucas said.
There's so much here that we have to reduce to 75 words, should we move in that direction?
Why don't we remove it and then ask staff to bring it back to us in policy
There you go.
form?
Yes, very
And you're
good.
talking about section 32, just to be clear.
And I would go further than a policy point. Maybe it needs to be an ordinance, so that way if anyone did try to change it, there would be multiple public notices that would have to go into
There you
effect.
go.
Yeah.
Idea.
So,
Yeah.
The ideas just keep coming,
Okay,
better and better.
next topic.
Do y'all want them to have to live in the city?
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
I would like them to live in the McKenzie house altogether.
In the McKenzie house? All three of them together.
I get upstairs.
I'd say
Too
move,
close to the mayor.
Yeah.
move to the city
Or
You know.
close enough.
upon taking office, within so much time, become a city resident.
Yeah, because I saw that was in here, if I remember correctly, that we, yeah, obviously, if we're looking to hire somebody, they shouldn't have to live in the city in the moment when we're hiring them, but they should have a certain time period where they should have to live in the city.
The,
6 months is what it's in here.
To the Bay County resident is what's in
Yeah,
there
it says
right
Bay
now.
County resident.
Yeah, we want them to
Not
live,
city.
I want them to live
I
in the
wanna
city.
live in-
I'm a big fan
If you
of
gonna be the manager of the city,
eat your own dog food. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. So that's a
software technology.
software.
Did you just describe our
Eat your own
city
dog
as dog food?
Yeah, it's called eat your own dog
I
food.
didn't know
What
what
it
to
means
say.
is use your own
Right, I would
product.
not.
I speak nerd.
You speak,
Yeah.
you speak.
Thank you. Yeah, that's gonna be on the news
That is
tonight. City's producing dog food.
commissioners,
There was actually a lot of discussion about this. I think there needed to be clarity for the city manager because it says at time of appointment, but I think to your point, that means if you hired someone that didn't live here, from 6 months from the appointment, they need to become a resident
I'd
of the
give
city.
them a year.
It's much more clear for the city attorney, and there was no requirement for the city clerk treasurer. But just to give you a little bit of kind of peek into the discussion that the board had, it was, they kind of looked at like today, like the number of attorneys, when Mr. Zimmerman retires in like 20 years, the number of attorneys that actually live in the city limits that have municipal experience is, so if you wanted to be able to pull someone in locally, that's why they said Bay County. That's why the board chose to expand it to not necessarily just live in the city, but to live in Bay County. That's all.
The pool gets
So-
smaller.
So I'm convinced this was added into the charter by the attorney that drafted these documents in the sixties to keep other
That was Nevin.
attorneys from, it was not Nevin. So, to keep other attorneys that were locally from competing for being city attorney.
Oh, wow, I never thought of
I,
that.
that's what I'm convinced of, because it makes no sense why the clerk and the city manager were not required to the same thing.
No, it's true.
So the orchestrator of the document just happened to put a limitation on that one office. But I mean, I do agree with there's something good, but I would point out that Mark wasn't a city resident, and there was definitely no loss of love for the city and how he served. And so, I mean, he was very passionate.
Oh, understood. And I don't think that we would probably run into that issue. I think it's just more of because there are rules, there are saying things that the city managers make decisions on, and it does impact the city. And again, I think they should have to live under the rules that they execute. That we do. I mean,
Yeah.
we make policy for the city, and we have to live under those same rules.
Yeah.
I can see both viewpoints, and so I could be, if you're very passionate about it, I would encourage you to speak up now.
But just the history on it, the way the 1963 charter was written is the city attorney had to be an elector of the city. City clerk had no residency requirement. The city manager did not need to be a resident at the time of appointment. It never said when.
That
or
was
if.
back when the city attorney told the city manager what to do.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
So,
that.
so the
But
charter
also
review.
argue, the city was much smaller than
Right.
as
Yes.
well.
So the charter review committee said, let's
36,000.
standardize. And so until the last meeting, the draft read that within 6 months of appointment, then the clerk and the city attorney and the city manager would need to become a resident
I'd like to
of
see
the
that.
city.
If we're gonna put it here, I'd like to see that.
That's the way it read until the last meeting, and then it was changed.
We also can solve this through the contract. So that is the mechanism by which we could use here. We could leave it as it sits and just say, hey, for the next contract that we write, we just include that.
Then somebody will forget on the next contract.
Well, what I'm saying there is just thinking through it, if we get, a great clerk that has applied and they live, and I do not have anybody in mind, so I'm sure somebody fits this, but I do not have anybody in mind.
Timbuktu.
Let's say attorney, let me
Say listen,
completely
say that.
switch to attorney here. But let's say we have a city attorney who wants to apply and, we're hiring for a city attorney and they live in Bay County, but they don't necessarily live in Panama City. Do we really want to force that individual to relocate just a mile or so? We could do that through the contract. And we would have the contract when we know who it is we want to hire. So it leaves us that flexibility to say, hey, Nevin's protege or whatever doesn't have to live in the city limits, but maybe they do.
This is widely debated across the United States in city manager positions. Residency requirements are something that commissions vote on regularly before they even offer a contract to a city manager. I see it widely, and not that I'm looking, but there's recruitment brochures that go out all the time nationally. And you see it very widely, and in just about every recruitment, one of the first things they say is there's a 6-month residency requirement, or there's whatever that is. And industry standard, I would say, for city managers is a 6-month after appointment that they have to reside within the city. Now, that's becoming, as the talent pool continues to shrink to a degree nationally, there are some city commissions that are trying to flip that. So I would say, it'd be, just in my opinion, not that it counts, but if it were not in the charter, to offer you guys more flexibility.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm leaning into is the flexibility piece of it.
I believe, Mr. Zimmerman, with the charter, the commission could choose to tighten some of the requirements, but not loosen them. So if the charter says you must live in Bay County, you could, on a contract, say Panama City specifically, but you couldn't say, okay to Gulf County or Washington County or Walton County.
Interesting.
That's generally the rule, I think, is you kind of work down. What I've always understood with laws, locally, you can get more restrictive, but you can't get less restrictive than what might be in a document such as the charter or constitution locally. So
that work?
that's my question for Mr. Zimmerman. Did I
So
stump
we
the
could
city
restrict
attorney?
it, we could restrict it further with ordinance, or we could
Probably.
take it with the contract. I mean, they would still
Yeah,
technically
they're
meet the
still in
requirement.
Bay County.
Yeah.
So they do have to reside in Bay County. I believe so. I mean, this came up at the last meeting, it hadn't really. But I think if it stayed, you have to live in Bay County. And then you wanted in the contract to live in Panama City. I believe you could make findings about why to do the job. That makes sense. But then that gives flexibility. I believe so. I believe that's a fair statement. I'll think about it further, but I think that's probably correct.
So we have two items possibly coming back to us to discuss.
I'm fine.
Residency and the,
Agenda.
On the agenda,
I'm fine with it as it reads because I'm fine with putting it on the contract.
to be in the city.
I know I kind of brought it up, but I'm fine with putting it on the contract as to whether or not they need to live in the city.
Yeah,
what page was that on the red line, sir?
I'm not looking at the red
Okay,
line.
it's on page 4,
thank you, sir.
3 or 4 with the,
All right, any other discussion on that item? Let's go to the next one. Any other hot topics?
I mean, we're skipping over on the first page where they've kind of got all the changes. And, motion passed and all that. I think we all are, I'm assuming that we're all kind of agreeing on that, the ones we're not talking about, we're okay with. Putting mayor to be mayor commissioner, to, the cleanup part of this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, you can bring up any topic you like.
Oh, I know, but I agree with it. So, Yeah.
yeah. Silence is agreement, is what you're saying?
yeah,
Well,
I mean, there were
That
things that
says
they,
I'm better when I'm quiet, so.
there were things that they didn't tackle, which
love
is understandable, but I don't want to tackle them either, so,
Well, But
so
here's my
so they just
concern.
wht be tackled.
That's a lot of changes.
So-
Well, I
It's
think
easy to say no to.
this is a really great document. I really do, because again, this thing hadn't been looked at since most of us here hadn't even been born yet, and so that's where I think they did a really great job going through it. I know it was difficult for them at times, but I wasn't expecting this much to come out of it, let alone changing all kinds of crazy stuff in the charter. So I really do think that they provided a very solid foundation for future charter
So do I.
reviews.
And I think it's reflective in our conversation, because the vast majority of this feels like very common sense. Like I could explain these changes to anyone, to any constituent, and be like, no, this is why it made sense.
But
I
if-
mean,
And Josh, I think we're gonna need to do that because it might get lost in the property tax thing. We need, one thing that Brandon said to us at the beginning, he said, having too many changes creates the possibility of somebody just saying no because, what are y'all doing to it? I don't wanna learn anything about it, I'm just gonna say no. And I agree with that, but most of these, if you sat down and looked at it, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense.
Well, I think if we can get this through with a 5-0 vote up here, that's a vote of confidence from us, and then we could even direct staff to produce a video, a 2-minute long video that goes over these changes briefly. And as a-
FAQs.
Yeah, something like that would be
Yeah.
helpful too. Yeah, I agree. No one, if you handed them this and say, here you go.
Right, they're gonna burn it and leave.
That's a no.
Conversely, when y'all got the charter, when I first got the charter and I looked at it and I was like, geez, like there was so much into it and there was so much stuff that just needed to be cleaned up. And there was things in there that didn't apply anymore because law had changed.
Home rule killed our charter.
And I mean, it was very difficult to
Death by a
understand.
thousand cuts.
So I would much rather hand this to a citizen and say, here's your city charter, it's 18 pages. Anyway, better, I think it's much better than what.
And I agree with that, Brian. The idea here is we know that it needs to be changed. for the betterment of our city.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting one up on anybody. But the citizen, we've got to make sure that we communicate to the citizen why it's a good thing.
Oh,
the
for
city.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably 4 times more than we normally would have at that time of around that election.
Any other topics to discuss?
Just, when we hand this to the citizen, and they read the first section that says the existing municipal government of the
Yeah.
city of Panama City in the county of Bay and state of Florida, be and the same, is hereby abolished.
Yep. That wipes clean the old charter. Right, Nevin?
Or,
Yes.
okay, yeah.
Should there be something right after that that says, and a new one?
Well, yeah, that's
Go to
section
page
2. Municipality to be known and designated as the city of Panama City is hereby established. I think that's the next line.
No spoiler
I'm
alerts.
with you, yeah.
But that does sound kind of harsh,
It
doesn't
sounds ominous.
it? So I'll,
But it makes you want to read more.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's the same language
your
that
favorite
was
drinks
there
and-
in
In
1963.
right.
And it
So-
was probably there in 1925 when you combined St. Andrews. I
Exactly.
think that's probably what this
So
is from.
we'll-
I'm not a lawyer though.
We'll look at that and see
Yeah.
if that's the way, but yeah, that does sound.
But it sounds like you guys and gals would like this clarified and addressed because it does sound kind of harsh. Is that a collective?
Yeah, if you can soften it up, I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Abolished.
Yeah. Or get rid of it altogether if it's not necessary.
Right.
maybe add the year of 19,
Yeah.
whatever it was, and
For the
Okay,
video and anyone watching, nobody wants to abolish the city of Panama
That'd be
City.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the headline tomorrow morning.
Commissioners, Caroline Smith could answer that question.
Okay.
If you'd like. Caroline?
Please, Caroline.
You're muted.
Sorry, can you hear me all right?
yes.
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I needed to unmute myself there. So I just wanted to clarify that 1963, they were wholesale replacing the previous charter. That's not what's happening here. This is an amendment to the 1963 charter, updating it. So that section 1 that you're looking at, yeah, that does seem a little confusing, but because this is still the 1963 charter with amendments. And what's been happening all along the way is that, in a way, amendments have been happening, but they've been happening, because of the state law superseding what's in our charter and laws changing and things no longer being appropriate to be in our charter. And so that's been happening, factually speaking, but then we still are left with this charter that has all this archaic language and can be difficult to go through and could be confusing to people. Just for example, the boundaries where the ordinances just go on and on and on and on and on.
Caroline?
Cleaning those up is what's happening through amendments.
So Caroline, we might be able to change that to just state what you said. This is an amendment to the 1963 charter rather than abolishing and starting over.
Right, because we're not abolishing and starting over anything.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
gonna stay.
So
Well, you'll see some different words there.
Nevin, in section 6, and there may be other places where it says the former city of Panama City. May want
Along the same line.
to, same.
Oh,
same-
okay.
yeah.
That's a holdover from the last.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that may be salted throughout there.
Good.
So you may want to.
Thank you.
Any other discussion points?
I do want to have one brief, and this may be, I see that compensation of employees was taken outside of the compensation of officers and employees and created its own separate section.
What page is that, Commissioner?
This would be page 21 and 22 of the full packet. I guess my question is, and if I'm understanding correctly, this language has been there, but we are changing compensation to grade, which reflects our city pay band system. And the only reason why I ask this question is it's going to limit any of the budgetary conversations that I know you guys are having.
All right, so you're talking about section 82?
Yep.
Okay, let me-
You want to say that in layman's terms?
Yeah.
In layman's terms, is once we establish in the charter that there is a grade and it says the salary compensation shall be fixed and be uniform for like services of each grade of city service. The same shall be graded or classified by the city manager, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So it's basically alluding to a grade system for personnel, which in some ways limits the city manager's powers from the standpoint of they have to have some type of unified system of pay. It can't be, you make this, you do that. But in the other side of it too, is it is codifying that there will always be some type of graded pay system.
Do we
Yeah, I
have,
don't-
don't we have a ranges
system,
now,
yeah.
or steps, or do we?
Yeah, he's just saying it codifies it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did starting in what year?
I've been here 11 years, and I know Brandy's been here near double that. And we've, to my recollection, and I believe she could confirm that, we've had a graded system the whole time.
Okay,
It's just the grades, like what was added in the most recent pay plan was
yes, that's what I
steps.
understand.
And so everything, we've always had grades, and I don't think.
So this doesn't lock you into steps, it still locks you into grades as you have been.
Correct, because when I
Is that my
started here, you had,
That's the way I understood it,
All right,
you know.
I just
you had
wanted
grades
to,
and ranges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we
it's a
had,
new section, even though it's not a new section. So that's what it,
I'm
Yeah,
fine
Yeah,
with
it
it.
codifies current practice.
Any organization this large, you'd want to be handled like a professional organization, so that's a best practice inside of a professional organization, to have different grades and not necessarily steps. A lot of times they do pay bands inside of grades. But
well, it's not a performance-based system, I guess is my point and what I was
it
pointing
can
out.
be though. It doesn't preclude that, because it just says you have to establish the grades. It doesn't say how you get from one grade to another. So,
Okay. You answered my question.
Any other discussion?
Next
You're
steps.
looking at me like I'm crazy.
What happens next?
I mean, based on the conversation tonight, I think we've got a handful of very reasonable, simple changes. I would think probably that first meeting in July, we can put it on the agenda. That gives us about a month. It's too late for, June 23rd, obviously. July 14th, is that our first commission meeting? I think
I
it is,
believe
yeah.
so.
So we could look at putting this on there. If you'd like us to change this, the language of these few things, and then maybe have one more workshop before we put it for you for actual voting. We could do that, and we could look to maybe do the actual voting at the second meeting in July. Are any of you not expecting to be at the second meeting in July?
I would suggest that we not have another workshop and you just do like a first and second reading.
Okay, we can do that too.
if that's the case,
I'm
if-
assuming our only two items that are still in discussion, sounds like everybody's good with everything with the exception of the two items that you guys are coming back with us something.
Yeah,
Not that we're holding a vote,
No,
but,
because I still want to go back and
section
go through the red
32.
line again.
okay.
Yeah, this is very important, so.
I believe that we would adopt it by ordinance, and it would not be binding, obviously, unless it's approved by a referendum election. So typically, when you have a referendum question, you adopt it by ordinance, and then it doesn't take effect unless it's approved at the
Do
referendum.
we have enough time to do
Is
that?
this
Yes.
50 plus one, or is it 60%?
Yeah.
This would be 50% plus one for the city election in November. Yes, sir.
Mayor and Commissioners, before we push the timeline, if we're not going to do another workshop, which I thought coming into here, we more than likely would,
I'd like to see that.
I've just got one other item to,
I probably won't be able to go to it, so.
but this is just cleaning some language up after staff review. And this is both items are on page 26 of the red line version. It's police and fire services. The Charter Review Committee did a great job in simplifying this and taking out a lot of the stuff that's been as far as what home rule is preempted and the state has. But both of these sections read identically, and I just wanted to suggest some language that might help clean this up even further. It says the city commission shall maintain police protection services with a chief of police, comma, or lead person designated by the city or city manager or other lead person. And upon reflection of that, it reads wonky. And so our suggestion would be to have it read, the city commission shall maintain police protection services with a chief of police who, if it needed to be a different person than the chief of police that's employed by the city, you could still designate a chief of police, just like we designated a chief building official. But the thought is, again, the city commission shall maintain police protection services with the chief of police designated by the city manager. And then the same for fire. Because the or city or other lead person is very vague, and it doesn't make sense of who the designating authority is.
Can I ask why this wasn't brought up with the charter review? There's multiple attorneys on that board.
This was noticed by our staff, and when this was sent out Thursday, I think these edits were there, but I just wanted to bring it up in case we don't do another workshop. I think,
I don't have a problem with it.
Well, I don't know what the effect is.
Yeah,
So-
and
I would appreciate the board being included in
Yeah.
that kind of language change.
I
Well,
read the
that's what we're
summary,
doing now.
it does
The
address
charter
it.
review board is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it does address it in Mr. Berg's memo.
Yeah, it
me
says
find
that
the-
he cleaned it up.
Yeah,
Because where
But
it
it-
says designated by the city, who would that be?
That's the question.
Right.
And
I see, I follow that.
So who wrote that? It wasn't the board that wrote that.
they cobbled that together, and I think Caroline, when they passed the motion to make that change, she presented that back. The Charter Review Committee reviewed it, but when I see designated by the city, is that a municipal vote for our chief of police? Is it the city commission doing that? Is it? and so-
Anybody with a badge?
Well, and.
Or
and
without a
that's-
badge.
Yeah.
So
No, I meant
that's,
the city,
what
not
page
a
is
police
that?
badge, but.
What page is that?
It's page 6 at the bottom, and it goes over to page 7 of
No,
the.
no, I already read what I
Oh,
guess
sorry.
this
Brandon
is
had
page
drafted.
26 of the red line.
Workshops.
We do. So will be a quick, we don't have to do an in-person workshop, and I don't want to take up a virtual, but maybe we just lead off of the first 10 minutes of the virtual workshop of this discussion.
I
Carry it forward.
Yeah, I think the next one could absolutely be, I was gonna suggest that, I mean, this has gone, in my mind, very swimmingly.
Yeah, 95%
And it
knocked
seems
out.
like there's a collaborative effort
Okay.
to move this forward, so.
So my interpretation of the way that this is written, this allows the commission to choose how the police chief is appointed. That, this is just I'm not an attorney. It is a one-sentence statement that says that the city commission shall maintain police protection services with the chief of police or lead person designated by the city, which would be us as the representative, the city manager, which would be Jonathan, or other lead person, which would be if there's ever another change in leadership. So that means the city commission can designate that authority to the city manager, or they can designate it to someone else.
I think if that's the will of this board, I think it would be better just to state that than it being vague as is.
We do not need to be involved in any appointment of a police chief. I think that, do we?
But this was a big conversation just over in Lynn Haven.
I know.
And I think what I understood from this is they tried to and attempted to give us maximum flexibility. So should the board's will be that the city attorney or the city manager continue to appoint the specific position, that can be. Should it be something different, it allows the board to make that decision.
Oh, and cities do that all kinds of
Oh,
stuff.
I know.
Some do like, some kind of appoint the parks people, but not the chief of police. Some
I
can
know.
fire but can't hire. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But what I will say is the way that it's currently written in the charter, that was unspoken. And so at any point in time, the commission had the authority to appoint a chief of police if we wanted to.
100% correct. I'm
So,
not
so
arguing
are
that
you,
point.
so they really didn't limit us any more than what we are today. They just summarized everything. It's the exact way that it is today.
Yeah, and it doesn't offer any additional, or does it offer any less, quote unquote, protections or sureties that a chief of police would actually exist in the city of Panama City?
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is, I didn't want it to cause undue confusion if it's not this board interpreting that, when Mark Smith retires in 20 years.
No, I mean, I felt like I read it and I was very clear. It's the
Okay.
same thing. Is the commission has the authority to appoint fire chiefs. We have the authority to appoint, we have the authority to appoint any department head, whether we wanted to or not. It is only just at the discretion that the city manager has that.
Then my suggestion would be to take the lowercase city on the second line and just change that out for commission.
What gives us the authority to appoint department heads?
The fact that it wasn't in the charter saying we couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, so so we have the authority to investigate departments, officers, and employees. We have the authority to stand up a department, to take down a department. And we've done, a PMO office existed because the city commission allowed it to exist. It did not exist before. So it's no different than the powers that exist today. It's just you don't see the commission leverage those authorities in whatever way. So I guess it's stating the same. If we're asking, do I want to limit the elected bodies on their ability to appoint, not appoint, or make some future decision or something like that? The answer is no. If there's different language, happy to see that language.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
And the existing ordinances that are on the books as far as how the city manager would appoint, they would require ordinance changes as is, so, for both fire and police chief.
so there's already protections in place
Yeah.
unless we choose to change an ordinance.
Correct.
So,
Let's assume there's a basket weaving department. If y'all vote to direct that department be dissolved,
it's gone.
it's either gonna happen in one step with me doing it or a second step with me being removed and then y'all doing it. I think
She likes
that's-
baskets.
I just, it was
Yeah.
it was a concern with staff. I wanted to make sure you guys heard it. And if this process was moving as fast as I saw it moving, then I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up.
I think what I looked very specifically in looking to this is at what point in time are we limiting an elected body from influencing government operation? That is the whole reason why people elect people, is to influence the way that government operates. So if there's different language that's presented, but the core responsibility still needs to be is we ultimately set up the way that departments operate, and then we hand them off to the city manager for the day-to-day operations of the city.
You're preaching the associate pastor on that one, and pun intended.
Okay.
But
To the
I just wanted to make sure that it was, you guys had an opportunity to discuss it before, it just got packaged up to a commission meeting. That's all. Thank you.
I do have a question. Section 54, page 16 on the red line, power over waterways.
Yes, I love it.
The city shall have full
Page
power
16, red line.
and jurisdiction, and the commission may, by ordinance, provide the protection, care, and control of the waterways within the city limits. Do we have a survey or a map of where the water is within the city limits? Because you can get into the intercoastal waterway, and then it comes back into, who owns out, as you get closer to the pass?
Depends
Where
on who
does
you
that
ask.
begin and end?
I'm not sure. I mean, we definitely have surveys and maps of the city, but that's a very specific one. I'll have to,
And the reason I ask is we have a litany of new boats out off of Beach Drive.
Have you got
And a
those
whole
emails
bunch,
too?
we got a whole bunch of new ones out in back of Watson Mile. Oh, yeah.
I got 9 of those
They
emails.
lit me up out of Cove Condo the other day. And honestly, they were cool with it until the junkers showed up. But they're sitting right on the edge of the intercoastal. I mean, they are all parked right on the edge. So FWC won't go over there and the Coast Guard, what day, what's their job? It's their job. And I've talked to everybody there. But if we have control over the waterways, now get a boat removed is like getting into Fort Knox. But we might have some more influence than I originally thought. And I don't know what powers we have.
the city, where do the city limits extend out into the water, Mr. Zimmerman?
Okay. Caroline Smith is going to answer that. But before Caroline, because she did a lot of work on exactly how far we extend out into the
I think that's why we
waterways.
have
Yes,
a
sir.
police boat too,
But-
we have a fire boat, we
Oh,
have
good point.
jurisdiction
Right.
Yeah.
inside of the
Can we rewrite
waterways
this
to
as
a
pirate
extent.
How does this impact dredging?
But what I wanted to mention before Caroline answers that question, going back quickly to the police chief and the fire chief, the Charter Review Committee, they wanted a simple statement that provided maximum flexibility. And the word city, lowercase city, Caroline believes that was the purpose was that was city commission, so that the city commission
That's
or
why I just wanted
city manager, and the word lead person was in case there was ever a consolidation someday, like the city of Callaway consolidated into the sheriff's office. And so they want just maximum flexibility. That was the purpose behind that. But Caroline, could you answer the question for us about how far our jurisdiction goes into the water?
Well, in general, it goes to the center of the bays. So the center of St. Andrews Bay, except you must deduct the intercoastal waterway from that because we cannot go into the intercoastal waterway. So wherever the intercoastal waterway is, we go up to the intercoastal waterway. Wherever it's not, we go to the center of the bay or the bay system that goes around us. That's where the boundaries are to the city.
All right, so Caroline, if I'm standing on the dock at the yacht club, I've got our waterway, I've got the intercoastal, and then I've got more water, and then I've got Redfish Point. What's the center? But I've also got all the bay that goes out to the Gulf. Where's the center?
Catch one snap wherever he wants.
Well, where the intercoastal waterway is, we do not go into the intercoastal waterway.
So you go up to
Up to,
the
Up to.
intercoastal waterway.
So
we're moving some boats.
What if change?
I was gonna say, snapper
Isn't this the same
still is
thing that
snapper
says-
season.
That's right.
So to clarify, there's no change to this section.
Yeah, there's no
That's
change to the
correct.
section.
It's same.
So I do have a question for the attorneys in the room. If I'm standing on, say, the end of the old runway, how far does the city limits extend to there?
It would go to the, probably the center of the bay, but it would go to the intercoastal waterway, probably. You're talking,
You talking about, it comes out on East Bay there, that side?
But I think the key to
You're
what
talking
you're
about
saying,
Sweet Bay.
you're trying to help some constituents get a
I'm
dredge
just
done.
making an argument.
It does say
yes.
which public water supply of the city is
but
taken.
but whatever it is, it remains the same.
Yeah, I know. It's
It's
not-
It's not being changed. It's not changed.
I just want to know if we had any maps or whether,
It's very interesting that that's in the charter, though.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Otherwise,
I was
it's-
curious.
And it's approved by the legislature, I mean, in
The mayor wants a pirate
1963.
hat.
That is interesting. So you're saying that this authority supersedes state authority, or is it?
Yeah, I was gonna mention
of the
that,
city.
like, we can't go snatch a whole bunch of boats out because FWC is the
well, that's
ruling
what
authority
people
on
ask
that.
about.
So I don't want to get the word out tonight that we're,
yeah, there's the headline. Yeah, we're not doing that, that was fun, but I am gonna go talk to them some more.
Just like the state troopers can write you a ticket within the city limits. The FWC can write you
Yeah.
a ticket within the
Yeah,
city
so I
limits.
mean,
too.
I would still, they still have authority. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's not that,
Yeah.
but the question is what can we do to aid the requests that we get with like a derelict boat or, or dredging issue or things like that?
Here's the
Does
other
this
problem.
afford us any
They're
other
dumping in,
opportunity?
every day they're dumping into the bay.
Removing trash,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, enforcing people from dumping their sewage into the bay. I mean, all that kind of stuff.
I might
So,
be bringing
anyway.
up more in, places, and that way they can pay and get dumped. So,
Any other discussion?
Could be.
Meeting adjourned.
Oh, actually,